Awesome. Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in for another amazing Hack the Box AMA. We're going to go ahead and get started here in just a moment. On with me today, I have the amazing Mubix. If you're not familiar with Rob, he has done amazing work for the InfoSec community. He has been involved with InfoSec for over 10 years and has created some amazing content and been involved with some amazing initiatives. Rob, would you go ahead, or Mubix, would you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
First off, hi. Wow. Tell me a little bit about yourself. That's a deep question just to kick things off.
I know, right? I'm opening starting things off with let's sit down and get you on the therapist couch for a little bit.
Yeah, no. So I love InfoSec. Like it's more than just a job for me. It's like a hobby. I love just whenever I can. And I'm not trying to sell anything, not trying to sell your services, but like any I can, I love hopping on Hack the Box and just trying stuff, right? And seeing if I still
We
kind of got it.
appreciate it. Totally not sponsored, right?
Yeah, no, but seriously, like I was doing Hack the Box last night. I was doing Precious last night and trying that out. So, like,
Heck yeah.
Anyways, a little bit about me. I started my InfoSec career. I like to think about it as I started it when I was a kid, and I didn't know that I was hacking or anything. When I first when I first triggered, like when I first knew that this was something I was into, um, it was back when the original Nintendo was out, and they had a game genie. And I thought, hey, I could cheat at these games. This is awesome. Like, and my mom would come in and she's like, "You're ruining the game. You're getting to the end too fast. The challenge is what you want." And I always thought like figuring out like looking through Nintendo Power or like searching online really didn't exist too much back then, but like searching and asking friends and stuff, hey, do you have a cheat code for this game or whatever, was the challenge for me. And then Game Shark came out, and the Game Shark was additional feature where you could put in the cheat codes. That was all normal. You could cheat, but you could then create your own cheats, and you did this by searching memory. I didn't know that that's what it was doing at the time. Did stuff stop? There we go. You went blank for a second.
Yeah, we're good. Here we go. We're back. You were saying about
Okay.
searching memory. You know, the funny thing about that is I actually had one of those for my Nintendo DS, and I had it for I would hack Pokemon games with that. The hunters, I understand completely. There's so much fun to play with those devices, and like you said, it's a different kind of challenge. It's it's a different way of thinking about it. You were saying though you were searching memory and going through and modifying that to create your own cheats.
Yeah, so you'd find your health bar was at 100 or max because you did calculating health, right? And then you'd hit the special button on the Game Shark. It would then go and say, what's changed? And you say, okay, I got hit by something. It's a lesser value. And then you'd get hit or get a health, bonus or whatever. And then you'd hit the button again and it'd go up. And then you would slowly get down to the exact memory address where your health was being stored. And so once you did that, you could lock it, which basically meant that the Game Shark would rewrite that memory address constantly. And once you locked it, then you could go through and you had infinite health. And so that was so interesting to me that I didn't care what game it was. I would play first person shooters. I would play all these different games. Like what was the one? The clown, Twisted Metal.
Yeah, Twisted Metal. Excellent
on
choice.
PlayStation. Yeah, and that people, my brother and stuff would hate me because I'd have the infinite health because I'd found the memory address and he didn't. So it's like I'm not really cheating. You could have done the same work, anyways.
That's
amazing. Really where I see my start in InfoSec. I just didn't know that that's what it was, because that's really where my
you found your hacking spirit almost, to get to a very high level place with it.
Yeah.
You found that want to kind of tear things apart, which is just really cool. I
Yeah.
mean, the fact
So
that I didn't even know that it just overwrites the memory constantly, that makes a lot of
yeah, because
sense.
you can't lock memory, right? Like it.
Mhm.
I mean, you can make it not writable, I guess, but like that's not what they had back then. Um. Anyways,
Yeah.
so in in security, like I didn't really start in security till 2005. So I was in the Marine Corps from 2000 to 2008, and I went over to Okinawa, did explosives and like learned how to build mines and bombs and all that kind
Wow.
of stuff.
That's cool.
and and then I switched over because like I still loved computers, and I switched over. My new MOS was 0656. I did the school for computers, and I got stationed at Quantico, Virginia, and that's really where I've never left anymore. And I got into the Marine Corps CERT. The Marine Corps CERT was super eye opening. Like I found my calling, like back from the Game Shark days. I was like, oh, I can look at malware. I can discover like intrusions. Like that I knew
Well,
that was what I
and a
was
lot of
in
it's the
for.
same. A lot of it's so
Yeah,
similar that I'm sure you're thinking, this is what I was doing.
yeah, absolutely. So after that, like I knew where I was going. So I worked for the Pentagon. I worked for the Senate. I worked for a couple of different agencies. I worked for General Electric as an internal red teamer. I worked at Rapid 7 as a pen tester. So red teaming and pen testing is my life. I love it. I do it um, authorized, so like hack the box all the time, off duty. And so now, uh, in the last couple of years, I started being a manager and leader of it. So I get to build the team the way that I think it should be, and make that grow. So that's kind of about me. Um, and I would be reminiscent to talk about myself if I didn't talk about my kids and my wife and all of that, because that's really
Let's see. Do we still have audio? Stream chat, can you hear me? Maybe. Chat, you can't hear me? Okay. Trying to figure out if we lost Rob. Okay, cool. We'll give him just a moment. We'll have connection back here in just a second. May just be Wi-Fi is cutting out just a little bit. How are you doing, chat? And thank you for letting me know that you can hear me. I really appreciate that. Yeah, we'll hang out here for just a moment. Worst case scenario, if Rob's internet ends up being a little rough, we can always reschedule this, and we'll get it figured out. But thank you all for just hanging out and chatting with me. I know this is what you were looking forward to. Let's just go hang out with Dark. Here, give me just a moment. Heck yeah. Hey, we're always any cool stories for you. Let's see. I met some amazing people at Tech Space Con. That was really cool. For any of you that didn't get the chance to make it to that conference, the conference was held at the Kennedy Space Center, the visitor center down in Florida. It was really cool. There we go. There's Rob. Hey, there we
sorry.
go.
Of course,
God.
my internet cuts out. That's exactly what it was. That's exactly what would happen, right? Like internet cutting out
I,
right in the middle of this.
oh
But now
yeah.
I'm on my phone, so we'll see how this goes.
Heck yeah. I appreciate you rolling with us. Hey, I'm glad that we could make it work out. I was just talking with Chad anyway, so we're doing good.
Cool.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. You were saying you were telling me about all your amazing experience. And then you were mentioning about your family.
Yeah. So obviously you can't talk about yourself, about who you are without talking about, I have a wonderful wife, 3 kids, and they're much of my life. And unfortunately right now I am away from them, but looking forward to being back with them soon. Just like, that's what drives me. My wife makes me a better person, that kind of stuff.
Heck yeah. There we go. I was struggling with my mic there for a moment. Well, and
No worries.
it's everyone always say, whenever people say that they're a self-made man or something, they really leave out the part where it takes a village and it's not just you, it's having that backing of the people that are around you. So no, I mean, heck,
Yeah.
that's a great thing that, keeping them in the back of your mind, especially while you're doing something like this. No, that's awesome. Heck yeah. Let's see. Then we had some amazing questions that are starting to come in from
Okay.
chat. Bala, I
Yeah.
saw your question. We'll go ahead and get to that here in just a little bit. Um, just for chat, real quick, if anyone has any questions they'd like to add, we did have a form out before our AMA, as always. But if you have any questions you want to add, feel free to put them in chat. We'll do our best to get to them. Awesome. Let's see. Well, my next question was, what's a moment from your early hacking journey that stands out to you? But I think we already touched on that with
Yeah, absolutely.
the Game Shark, which is incredibly cool. I never thought of that, and I was thinking about it. I played Pokemon and whatnot, and there were cheats that let you get Pokemon that had like maxed out stats and everything.
Yeah,
And it was just writing to memory, and I thought it was the coolest thing when I was younger, and it was just
absolutely.
I'm pretty sure I broke my first one. But did you ever end up breaking any of them when you were messing around?
Well, the Nintendo, excuse me, wow, sorry.
Oh, you're all good.
Every possible thing going wrong, right? Um, so the
Hey, it
Nintendo,
wouldn't be exciting otherwise, right?
yeah, the Nintendo actually, it was really resilient. So you would crash it, but you could restart the game or whatever. But there was one, I think it was like Metal Gear Solid, and I was playing with the stuff with that, and I gave myself like too many. I think it was either too many bullets or too many, like uh I don't remember, probably bullets. So I gave myself too many bullets, and then that save broke. So I had worked all the way through, and I don't know if you played Metal Gear Solid, but you have to sneak through so much stuff. And there's some things you can cheat with, but there's just some things that you just can't. Um, and and I'd worked like halfway through the game, and I added more bullets to it, and I'm like, hey, let's give one more than or 50 more than I have before, and that save game would never work again, which really sucked.
That sucks. Oh my gosh. No, that's a fun. That's I never thought of doing that in Metal Gear Solid. I've great game series, and that's one of those that yeah. I mean, I guess I wonder if the memory of too many bullets or something started bleeding into another part of the save and messed it
Yeah,
up.
probably. Yeah,
No,
absolutely.
that's awesome. Um, Kind of related to that, I had we did have a question in chat that have you ever done a Stack Overflow? And I want to expand on that just a little bit. And take that. Do you have any favorite hacks, or have you ever done a favorite Stack Overflow or anything like that?
Um,
I know I'm putting you
okay,
on the
well,
spot a little bit.
this is new to me, because I thought Stack Overflow was where I copied other people's code into my code. Like, that's what that is, right? I don't know about
Yeah,
Stack Overflow exploitation.
it's so kind of I try
Oh,
to
you mean buffer overflows? Oh, yeah,
yes,
yeah,
buffer
yeah.
overflow.
Oh,
There we
sorry,
go. Thank you.
sorry.
Verbiage was a little
Um,
off there.
no, no, no. Stack Overflows. I get it. I just was in my head. My reference was the website. So,
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing. I'm
so
like, wait a minute, what's going on here?
So Stack Overflows, buffer overflows. I don't really have a favorite because I don't have traditional like computer science background. So like I am the script kiddie, from hell. I figure out everything by
Is that on
copying
your
stuff.
resume? The script
Yeah,
kiddie
I
from
should
hell.
be.
That'd be on
um,
a business card right there.
there you go. But no, Stack Overflows. I don't really like. I went through. Oh man, Peter E. Oh, why am I forgetting his last name? He's a friend. I went through a bunch of uh, Stack Overflow and Buffer Overflow training, and it just doesn't ever stick. Like I like it, I think it's cool, but I constantly have to re-reference things. Like I've been trying to get into anger and learning anger, and I love what it can do. I just can't like get it to stick in my brain, and I don't know. It might be because like memory allocation in that I learned in like high school and haven't like don't have a other
Mhm.
traditional like um, formal education on it. But I think that for Stack Overflows, my favorite was actually through um, uh, like what was it? WFTPD. Like it was a Windows FTP that the offensive security people use in all of their training, or least used to. And when I learned about what are they called? Canaries, not canaries. Shoot,
Stack canary.
when you put no, it's not stack canaries. It's when Easter eggs, not Easter eggs. Shoot, like the eggs that
I
you
know what
put
you're
in.
talking about. I just can't think of the term either.
What is the stupid word? I'm sure chat will figure it out. But when you can put
Yeah.
those eggs into memory and have your code find it in super speed, like searching memory, I didn't think it was that fast because all of my experience was like really slow because of the Game Shark and stuff like that. And so when I saw that like you can put, oh man, it's gonna kill me. I don't know what it's called. Those eggs. I don't
Yeah,
anyways.
I think that's roughly the term. I forget the actual term, and chat hasn't
Um
hopped in
so
yet.
so Woot Woot W00T W00T was the one they used because it would not show up in standard coding anywhere. It was a very um, non-common like set of words together, and that's what I used, and I loved it, and that's really where I learned the the capabilities of Stack Overflows. So like I would say that's my favorite because that's where my mind kind of opened up to the possibilities of them. I still don't I still to this day have trouble like doing basic buffer overflows, but I get the concept, ROP chains, all of that. Like I get it, I understand it. It's just I have to reference like return to libc stuff every time I try it.
Oh, I mean, I have to do the same thing. It's one of those things where it really stresses the importance of specialization in this field and the
Yeah,
importance of, really diving deep in what you love within the field itself. Chat did say
absolutely.
egg hunter. That was the term we were
Egg
looking for.
hunter. That's what it
Yeah.
is. Egg hunter. Thank you, chat. You're
um,
awesome. See, I
Heck
need to
yeah.
reference
Thank you,
things
chat.
even to the
Yeah, I know. We were both struggling there for a moment. Continuing on with that thought, do you have any favorite hacks that you've ever done? Just anything that you really like how it works? Uh, like for myself, I really like zip slip or like a specific phone. Do you really like Eternal Blue for some reason? I, I say for
yeah,
some reason because I swear everyone in the field at that time, that was a nightmare. It was everywhere.
yeah. I liked um I didn't work on it that much. I didn't play with it that much. I'm sorry. But like MS-14068, it was either 068 or 48. Now I'm second guessing myself, but that vulnerability in Kerberos, where you could go from user to domain admin without ever touching a domain controller, like you just make the ticket. I mean, you have to do the TGT first stuff, but standard user And that that was the log4j of my time, right? Like that was the like, oh shit, I have to go fix things right now vulnerability. And there was such an interesting like timeline for that, right? It came out, I think it was Benjamin Delpy who's like, I know how this works. I'm not saying anything. And a few other researchers were like, I know how this works too. I'm not saying anything either. And there was they showed like POCs, but no one released anything. And companies, like the company I worked for at the time, we had like 111 domain controllers. Like we patched all of them in one night, like all of them.
Oh my
And
gosh.
oh yeah, it was super stressful. Uh, it was kind of amazing the amount of like effort that was put into making sure that this, didn't affect us. And like that vulnerability was so simple and so like unique to Kerberos that it was just beautiful. Like I, excuse me.
Oh, it's
Some
one
of
of
the
those
other
things where you get that subversion of expectations within the software flow.
absolutely. Yeah, it was just I think that is my favorite exploit or vulnerability, still to this day because just how it came out, how it worked, how the dynamics of the community that like people figured it out very quickly. Um, but no one released any POC, no one released any fake POCs that I remember. Like it was all like, hey, we're going to take a step back from the drama and the sarcasm and all of this stuff, and we're going to say this is really bad. We're just going to get this fixed, and that was kind of cool to see.
That sounds like just a really interesting experience in industry. Do you remember, was that like a, everyone pile into the boardroom, we're going to patch these domain controllers overnight situation? Or
Oh
was it
yeah,
much more of a, do you feel like you had time to plan in that case?
yeah. So we did have time to plan, right? So the it took like 2 months for an actual POC to be dropped. Um, and people had the opportunity to I know 2 months seems like a really short amount of time,
Mhm.
but Microsoft came out with a big warning. They told all of their like their enterprise customers, go fix this now. Um, Emergency patch, all of that stuff. And um, and again, I think the nice thing was that most of the community was very very nice about like letting people get there. I know it's not like 90 days, but like this thing was, and so in contrast, Log4j, people were releasing POCs constantly, right? And that was so much more of a rush, so much more of a you can break things because you don't patch correctly, and all of the and I actually felt really obligated to put out like, here you don't have to do all of this. You like commentary about it because like there's so much miscommunication going on about that vulnerability. And
Mhm.
so like
Well, there was a lot of
in
fear at that time
contrast,
too, because it was just all
yeah,
of a sudden, we had Log4j sitting in our laps, and it was, shoot, what do we do about this?
yeah, and like that's a very big difference between MS 1468 because like everyone was cool, calm, collected, and fixed it.
Yeah, I mean, it really makes you appreciate when there is a vulnerability like that that is controlled, because it's not all that common. A lot of times we have these things that are just released on Twitter that they're out there. All of a sudden they're there.
Yeah.
That, has that been, have you found that to be a challenge within your role as the director of red teaming?
Which part? What to be a challenge?
Just when things are released all of a sudden, do you feel like you have to kind of drop everything that you're doing at that time? Or
Yeah,
do you find that
absolutely. So
here, go
sorry, go
ahead.
ahead.
Oh no, I just
Uh,
if you have to drop everything, kind of the challenges involved with that. Um and if there's
yeah,
any
so
just interesting things you've observed with being in your position.
so yeah, like Log4j is something that um people relied on our red team to really get to the ground truth of it. Like, what is the actual risk? So we did have to drop everything to do that. We had to work weekends and things, so that was a challenge. But I think that that's really one of the core pieces that a red team, external or internal, really shines at, right? Is giving you that ground truth. And I think that if we used red teams or pen test teams even more with that feature, other than just, hey, come, find vulnerabilities and get to domain admin, I think that we'd be in a lot better space um, as a industry.
Could you dive into that a little bit more? What do you feel about red teams or offensive operations in general? What do you feel helps make them so good at cutting to this ground truth and really cutting to the heart of the issue?
Oh, I thought you were going to open that up to all of the issues
Oh,
of
we
red
can
teams.
open it up to all of it. Hey, I'm happy to. Heck yeah.
But
No, I mean, it's an interesting thought because you think of it this way, red team, offensive teams, they're a really unique department within an organization. A lot of times they can be the team that's pushing for, they're the team that makes the difference with pushing against an issue. And I'm sure that's something that you've seen.
yeah, so the thing about pen test teams and red teams is, and I'm going to go on a small tangent real quick. If you in your
Heck yeah,
report
go
say
for
I
it.
could, if you say I could have or we could have done this in a pen test report, I will never hire you ever again, because that is the worst thing. Because what red teams and pen tests do is they give you the ground truth. They say that it's either I did it or I didn't. And that's the important piece about pen testing and red teaming, is because, like, if I get a vuln scan, all of these vulnerabilities, I don't know which ones were actually vulnerable. There's lots of false positives. If I do instant response, there's false positives all over the place, right? Red
Mhm,
team has no false positives, right? You either did it or you didn't. And
mhm.
that's the important thing about the red team or a pen test team, is because there's no, I mean, there's bravado and fluff and stuff like that to help,
Oh yeah, I
colors
mean,
and
there's a little bit
everything.
of there's pride in the industry. There always is. Yeah.
Right, but like, you either did it or you didn't, right? And that's
Mhm.
what I love about red teaming.
That's
One
interesting. I
zero.
mean, you're right, though. It gives you context on a lot of these things where with a vulnerability scanner, it'll say that, oh, this is moderately difficult to exploit. But what does that actually translate to? Is that something that's actionable or is that something that, moderately difficult? Does that mean impossible and not realistic to do?
Yeah,
No,
I'll,
that's
I'll give you an
interesting.
example. Um, so MS 2013 3900. This is a vulnerability that is in the certificate buffer of Windows. So it will say that a piece of code is signed correctly when it isn't. And this vulnerability was came out in 2013, just like it says on the tin. Um, and back then, Bit9 was a big thing, right? Everyone was really pushing for, hey, if it's not signed code, don't run it. And so all of the vulnerability scanners, all of the AVs, if it was signed, they didn't look at it a second time. Like, they said, yeah, that's good. So when this came out, big vulnerability, extreme, like, go patch now. Um, and it's getting a resurgence. I think 3CX or whatever, the recent breach, um, they're like, hey, we need to relook at this and repatch it because we rolled it back because it was causing problems. And this was a patch from 2013. Well, everyone's freaking out about it because, hey, like, this is a code signing thing. We got to put a registry key in, and it could break things, and this is really bad. And I'm looking at this thing, and this vulnerability was from 2013, when all of this, all of the level setting was on code signing. Nowadays, like EDR, AV, they don't care if it's signed or not. They might tick it down a little bit. They might say, it's a little bit more trusted, but,
Mhm.
like, it's so easy to get a code signing cert these days, or it's a little harder to get through Authenticode, but it's not too hard.
Yeah.
And
But even then, I mean,
so,
10 years. 2013, that was 10 years ago. That was a long time ago at this point, and the industry has changed, like you said. We figured out that a lot of these things like code signing, we used to think that that was not something that bad actors could do realistically.
Yeah. And now there's code signing certs all over the internet on GitHub and otherwise, and you can just get a valid cert. Anyways, but it's really not that hard. There's even a GitHub repository of a kernel driver that is signed by Authenticode and valid. You can load it into Windows right now. That you can read memory from. It's on GitHub.
That's nuts. I'm gonna have to go through and look that up later.
I don't have to sign my own code. I don't have to do anything. I just load this driver and now I can read memory.
Any red teamers that are watching this that didn't know about that probably just had their day made. That's amazing. Well, I mean, it really goes to show that a lot of these assumptions, it's challenging that. And your red team, your pen test team, they're good at challenging that assumption. They're good at it saying, holding it up to the light and saying, hey, what does this actually look like when we're, looking at it under a microscope when it's in practice?
Yeah. And there's a lot of vulnerabilities that never have a POC released, never have or it's too hard to exploit. I was talking to JDuck a few years ago. He's a very well-known exploit dev and reverse engineer. And I was talking to him, and he found, he worked on MS-1220, which is this RDP buffer overflow. Which
is super cool that he worked on that outright. That's cool. If you don't mind me pausing it for a moment, go ahead.
Yeah, so he worked on it, and he made POCs for it, and it was denial of service, denial of service, denial of service. And in the release, and all of the things that Microsoft put out, it said code execution, remote code execution. This is really bad. And JDuck's sitting there no, it isn't. It's a DOS. There's no he spent hours and days on this thing. And he's like, I can't find anywhere that I could do anything with this. So you're lying. So I think that there's a lot of vulnerabilities out there that are really, especially in vulnerability scanning, that say this is really bad when there's no chance of it ever, actually being exploited, or there's no, the path you have to take is 15 misconfigurations to make it, vulnerable. And so that's getting back to the question. I think that is what the red team does, is say, yeah, you should worry about this. This is stupid. This is stupid. This is stupid. This is, really bad. We need to fix this.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that really goes to show you the importance of that analysis in depth, offensive depth almost at that point, where you have that offensive.
Real quick, analysis. We need more. So there's a bunch of people in the world that have the analyst title that need to do more analysis. If I'm a vulnerability management or vulnerability analyst or whatever, I can't just take results from a vulnerability scan and then give them off to whoever. Look at it, figure it out. And that's really sorry to
no, you're good. That's a great point. You're right though. I mean, and to that point, a lot of people in an analyst position don't realize that if we're getting down to brass tacks, two things. One, pen testers need to realize a lot of times we're auditors in these cases. We're there to audit the systems. And from that, you're paid to think. You are there to think. And it's,
paying you for your expertise.
It is. And, a lot of people, it doesn't really kick in ever that they are a subject matter expert. That we think that we have these things and everyone knows these little truths about computers, and you take a step back and, even some of these basic things like knowing key combinations in Windows, a lot of people don't know those. And it's that power of being able to translate it, like you said. But no, that's a great point on analysts. I forget where we were going other than that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you, but it's a really,
no, that's a great point.
Word for me. It's a trigger word because I see so many analysts in this industry, InfoSec in general, not just vulnerability scan, not anything, but if you have the title analyst, they are paying you for your expertise. So use it.
Exactly. And it's, make your voice heard. I'm sure you see it a lot of times with junior analysts, or if you're newer in this field, anyone that's watching this or anyone after the fact. I mean, it is that find your voice, be willing to say something in the meeting. If you see something, say something about it, because, even if you're a little off, there's probably something there. I'm sure you've seen that before, that there's situations where people need to speak up.
Absolutely, 100%. And I
Um,
think that the imposter syndrome that people see is causing some of that, right? And and like, oh, man, I had a good tweet the other day about how to get rid of imposter syndrome, but now I'm forgetting. But like, it really is you having to realize that you are getting paid for your opinion, and that someone, it doesn't have to be you, someone saw that your opinion was valuable to hire you into that role. So give your opinion, even if it's a little bit wrong, even if you need to tweak it later. Like,
mm.
give your opinion, be vulnerable, be available to be wrong, try it out, like, and do your best. Do your diligence. Do, like, look at and try stuff. But like, yeah, um, I don't think
I
I'd
mean,
be
to
where
your
I am
point, you
today.
said be wrong. It's be comfortable with being wrong.
Yeah. I mean, you never learn. So I love the quote, you never learn something when you do something right. And
Mhm.
like, I love that quote because that gives me the permission to be wrong, right? And
Yeah.
so if I'm a student of learning, right? I love learning. Then that means that if I'm a student of learning and you never learn something when you're right, I have to be a student of being wrong, right?
Mhm. That's such a great
And
quote too, and it's one of those things where you need to find spaces that it's okay to mess up in. And that's one of the reasons why, school is so important in that way. And, finding those spaces in your workplace. I'm sure that you've seen that. It's having good teammates that allow you to mess up.
yeah, it really is. But I mean, it's also good leadership that allows you to mess up. It's also giving yourself or setting yourself that availability to be wrong, right? So like, make a lab, try things out, do that extra
Mhm.
stuff. Hack the Box is a great and again, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to advertise, but like, Hack the Box is a great place to be wrong, right?
No, feel free to advertise as much as you want. Just keep going. um, well, then, on that note, one of the things you had mentioned when we were speaking before the AMA was fallacies within infosec. Do you want to speak on that? Just any fallacies you see. I know that's a very broad question.
Yeah. So I think that one of the problems we have with InfoSec, one of them, um, is that we learn very early on um, that certain rules, certain things are how it is, and which is funny because as InfoSec, we trust but validate, but we don't, or trust but verify, but we don't validate or verify ourselves or our own community, which is crazy. So I'll start off with the easiest one: password managers. Um, uh, don't write your password down is such a stupid thing because they're like that. When someone says that out loud or on Twitter or whatever, don't write your password down. That tells me that their mode of thinking is only them. They and their immediate community are good at using password managers. They know how to use password managers. And that means that they're either they're just learned that way, or their mindset is so limited. And what I mean by that is, like, my mother is never going to use a password manager. She just won't. Um, it's too complex. It, like, she doesn't want to have to open up another program to log into a website. She
Mhm.
wants to, like, log into the website with her password and know it. And so, like, how do I solve that problem? Oh, just use a password manager? That's short-sighted. That's what's another word for it? Anyways,
It's trying to
but
make
that
a
is
simple solution out of a complex problem that can't have a simple solution.
but it is. Like, all you do is tell your mom or your or person, right, that writing passwords is down is fine. Like, it's
Yeah.
totally fine. Like, it's absolutely
It's really
okay.
not that big of a deal if you're safe about it too. It's just, you know, it's being mindful of what you have.
Just don't write it on a where a news, camera is going to see it, or or don't write it under your keyboard. Like the
I don't know. I really like putting my
99.9.
my passwords on like those garage sale signs out on the corner. I'll put my
There you
password and I'll
go.
see what service it's for. You know, there's my Gmail out there.
Perfect. That's the right way to
Yeah.
write their password. No, but like, think about the threat actors. Think about the bad guys. Who on earth is going to walk into your office and look at your password, then exit for some reason and go log in remotely? Like, or sit there on camera.
Mhm.
It's just the risk is so minimal to having your password written down that
Would you say it's
we
almost here? Go ahead. Sorry. You
no
said the
no
risk is so
that-
minimal to having it written down.
yeah, so
Yeah.
that we still focus on that as a bad thing, right? And that's one of the tropes that I just r- gets me inside,
Mhm.
because it's just so frustrating, because it's so limited thinking. So what we should do, if you are the person that says, password managers are the way to go, then make a password manager that fits on a USB key that auto logs into all of the things for someone, right? And it automatically generates. Like Apple and Android, I think, started having password managers in their browsers, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and so that is a way better password manager, where it auto says, "Hey, I see you're putting in a password. Do you want to auto generate and save it and sync it and do all that stuff?" When you make it user friendly and easy to use, easier than their current way of doing things, that's when security excels. When you
Mhm.
try and make like, I'll just move
You have
on
to
to the
make it
next
make
one.
sense.
Yeah. So like the next one that's really pisses me off is uh, user input,
Mhm.
sanitize user input. Like, okay, if I have sanitized user input on a pen test report, on a red team report, oh man, I get so frustrated, because that means that you have no idea how this application works, that you did no analysis. Like, you just said,
Mhm.
"Oh,
You didn't
I can
actually
do
read the
cross-site
code.
scripting, copy
Yeah.
paste," right? And so, again, getting back to, like, you are the analyst, you should do more work to figure out this thing.
Well,
So,
and it's almost, are
um,
you not thinking through it, or do you actually take the effort to think through it? And, you know, it's like 2 minutes of just thinking about it critically. You know, when you get there, you're going to get
yeah.
80% of it in about 2 minutes. But
So on your report,
yeah.
you put in like how to solve it, or how to actually do users, or give them references. Like, do the little bit of work and says, "Hey, I see it's a Ruby application. In Ruby, if you set this flag, it actually does sanitization on database queries." Like, do the 5 seconds to understand the application. But again, getting back to it, like, if you want to solve this problem, stop complaining about it. Stop saying, "Hey, do user input," and start like looking at the actual problem, the root cause, right? So the root cause is that we have developers who are still using Notepad or Notepad plus plus to write code. And those two things don't actually help you in security. So like, they just let you write the code. Like Sublime, great text editor, horrible for coding, because
Yeah.
unless you have a bunch of plugins that say, look at your code. But Visual Studio and other enterprise level like coding frameworks will stop you, like IDEs, big IDEs like Eclipse. They will stop you
Mhm.
from making mistakes. So how do we get those out of, the enterprise hands, where you have to pay thousands of dollars to do this, into people who can actually use it and have better code out there, right? Um, so what I'm saying is, like, if we can, if you really want to solve this problem, you become a developer who writes a library that plugs into like Sublime, or where people are coding, and you make it stop you from doing bad code. And like, that's the really frustrating part, is like, security is such a big industry, and so much money goes into it, that security is behind paywalls. A lot of paywalls. Like if you're not an E5 at Microsoft, you don't get Defender or all of this. Like there's so many, and I think that's changed now, so don't quote me on it. But like
Yeah.
there's so many things behind paywalls that stop good security from happening, and that's so sad. So
Yeah.
open source development is the big thing.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because that creates such a weird chain reaction where sure you have these big enterprises that have that the means to have that security, but that leaves out a lot of these small businesses, and ultimately it ends up hurting us on the whole because if they get in with the small business, they might have some different kind of bug or some different kind of issue that, or they might be the key to getting into your big enterprise. It hurts
Oh,
everyone.
absolutely. Like I can't tell you how many big enterprise applications use open source code that is written by one person.
I'm
Right?
pretty sure
So
it's
like
like all of them. Every single one of
right,
them has that
all of them.
one piece of code.
So you have a library or a piece of code or whatever that, Stack Overflow, whatever, like, but it's written by one person randomly that wrote it in Notepad or wrote it in Notepad++ or Sublime that has no security around it. That we need to get to those people, because that code eventually gets into enterprises these days, right? And that's really
Yeah.
where the root cause of the problem is.
It's almost like our priorities are kind of mixed up in what we're supporting. But
Yes.
I don't mean to lead you into that. I do intend to quote you on that. You have to be an E5 at Microsoft. Gonna tweet that here shortly. No, thank you for being willing to speak about those fallacies, because you can, even just listening to you, just myself, I can see the visibility that you have with your position because you have a unique viewpoint that you can see so much more of it, that it's no longer, it's hard to, when you're in the field at an analyst position, it can be really hard to evaluate your own position and see it in the way that you see it from your position. And it's so important. So thank you for speaking about those. It's just, yeah. Did you have any other fallacies you wanted to speak on? Here, go ahead.
SLA, and that's really one of the bigger ones. So I got two stories for this. First, and what I mean by SLA is service level agreement. It's the amount of time, and what I want specifically to talk about, like vulnerabilities. So if I report a vulnerability to a company, I expect it to be patched or handled in X number of time. And so I was working at a company. I'll just leave them anonymous. I was working at a company, and we had this piece of hardware that we would deploy out to a bunch of different states, and we sold it, right? And so this piece of hardware had a vulnerability in it, and we sold it for like $2 million for this piece of hardware. And the researcher came up to us. We didn't have a bug bounty at the time, and reported this vulnerability and said, "Hey, I'm going to give a talk on this in 90 days at this conference. I need you to patch this before this." And we change these pieces of hardware every 10 years. Like that's how long this thing lasts. And it costs millions of dollars each. So, and that's the fastest we turn these over. Like there's some places where the hardware has been there for 30 years. And so we're like, we already patched this vulnerability. We found it like 5 years ago in our own stuff, but like we're not going to be able to patch this because we would have to resell these big pieces of hardware over to these companies, over to these states, and like it's just not going to happen. And he was like, "Well, you got 90 days to fix it." We're like, "Okay, nothing we can do."
That's aggressive too. Oh my goodness. 90 days. I mean, in business time, that's not a lot of time. That's one quarter, realistically, a quarter, less than a quarter.
And if it was like a Windows vulnerability in a public facing like web app or whatever, that's one night we take it down, we patch it, we put it back up. Totally okay for that vulnerability to be, expected in 90 days. Not a big deal. But like a vulnerability in a piece of hardware, like, and it was running Telnet. Like that's what it was. You could access it on Telnet, and that was the big reveal that this guy was going to talk about. Um, and so like he gave the presentation, and a bunch of our stuff got attacked. Not our stuff, like we sell it, right? That's the product.
Yeah.
But a lot of these, and it could have gone so bad. Like this hardware is really important to the infrastructure of the state. And like, so what we did was we didn't sell at all. We bought Raspberry Pis. We put a case on it, and we said, hey, engineers, we're going to ship you a new piece of hardware. And all it did was IP tables off port 23. That's it. And so we shipped like 1,000 of these things. And you can probably blame us for the Raspberry Pi shortage for a bit. But like,
oh, so you're the one that's responsible for that. Okay.
Yeah. So we shipped so many of these things all over the US to get this thing patched, and patched by blocking a port. Like that's it. And like it was just so frustrating that he gave like 90 days notice, and he was like, I'm gonna, and what this could have done if we hadn't gotten to these systems was like human, like, how do I say this without like there could have been drastic human casualties because of this, right? Because if anyone exploited this vulnerability and went into Telnet and did bad things because he talked about it, like he didn't change the fact that it was on the internet. He changed the fact that like people knew about it. And I don't like security through obscurity, but like that was already where we're at with this thing. And he was just putting a public face on it, which made the risk much higher. And I know that there's going to be people who disagree with a state, but like or a statement, but like I would have much rather him just said, hey, here's a way you could patch it, or here's a suggestion, or anything other than go fix this. I'm going to talk about it.
Yeah.
And it was just super frustrating.
I mean, it's very blunt, and it almost feels like he wasn't, necessarily thinking through what happens after the fact. What happens after I report this? And
yeah,
it's almost blackmail at that point with a 90-day ticker on that. That's nuts.
Yeah, and actual human beings could die because of this vulnerability. Like I'll just say it related to power, if you hadn't figured that out. But like if someone did the wrong thing with this thing, it could shut off a power plant, which is super important. Like making that a big deal and making us get it patched was a good thing, but telling the world about it, not a good thing.
Yeah,
we had to scramble to get it fixed.
It's dealing with the reality of it, where, like you said, that 90-day time frame was not something that was realistic, and he effectively put it out there and could have caused, a lot of problems. And I mean, it leads into almost bug bounty programs with understanding that triaging does take a lot of effort. And, just because you're an independent researcher doesn't mean that, gets back to what we were saying before, where it takes a village. You are working with other people,
Yeah. And so
that's a great point.
The other story I want to get to is I learned, so I was one of those pen testers. Like I had a better feel for it, but like I was one of those that was like, hey, go fix this. Why can't you fix this? Until I worked at Uber, and they really readjusted my frame of SLAs. So when I worked there, they were like, hey, if you're going to classify this vulnerability as a critical, our criticals means we get everyone out of bed. So like everyone comes into work, no matter what time it is, and we have a 12-hour turnaround to fix. If you're going to classify this as a critical, that is what you're doing. So is this vulnerability still a critical? And I was like, no. Like, and so I loved that because businesses already have SLAs when it comes to outages or disaster or whatever. Like that is all planned in a lot of companies, not all of them, but like they
Mhm.
already have an idea of, hey, when shit hits the fan, these are the
Mhm.
things we do. And so, sorry, one sec.
Yeah, you're all good. Well, I mean, even to your point, Rob, it's understanding that, it's having that trust almost returned by the company, knowing that, hey, we are going to take this critical seriously, but does it need to be at that level? Where does
Yeah,
this actually play
exactly.
out in practice?
So when if you're a pen tester, and if I'm talking to you, and you
Hmm.
write things as a critical, like understand that the business no longer trusts you because you say it's a critical, because
Hmm.
they will look at it and say this isn't really a critical, and then they doubt the rest of your report, right? So if
Yeah.
you write your reports and say this would be a high, this is, putting an SLA into your pen test report and saying this is what I deem a critical, this is the turnaround time on it, that helps translate things. And I don't see that a lot. They just, put high, medium, critical and expect the customer to understand what that means. And unfortunately, that results in, customers not trusting your results.
Maybe that's something that almost could be communicated with the customer or from the customer. I'm wondering, maybe that miscommunication becomes a little bit better with customers providing that, hey, this is how we treat these different levels of vulnerability. So this is how it's going to line up on our end. If you give us a critical, we're going to get everyone out of bed. We're going to treat it like the world's ending because to us, yes, it is. And for reliability, you get these businesses where, like you said, it's what is the actual impact? You losing
Absolutely.
brand value or people are actually going to get hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just frustrating that like CVSS and like all the vulnerability scanners still have these critical vulnerabilities. And I think the definition of critical has really gone a little too far astray.
I mean, it's interesting because that's something that really you are in a unique position to be able to see that with your role because you see the after effect. And, that's something as a pen tester that I hadn't even really realized that it's almost a boy who cried wolf situation where if I'm going to say that everything I'm reporting is critical and it's not from a business standpoint, you
Yeah,
need to be able, not only as a pen tester, you need to be able to communicate these things, but you also need to be able to communicate the why of these things of why do you believe this
absolutely.
is critical. And I'm sure you've seen situations where it goes back and forth and you find that, hey, this actually is a real issue, or no, this needs to not be a real issue, this needs to be walked back, and we need to make sure that we're changing that on reports going forward.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say that needs to be added to more pen test reports is point of view. And what I mean by point of view is what I had to know or have to be able to exploit this vulnerability. And what I mean by that is like um, I've seen a lot of people report like NTLM v1 is critical. Well, so I mean it is like you can crack it down to NTLM. Like there's like a lot of bad things that can happen because you have NTLM v1 enabled. But the point of view is I have to be internal first. Like I have to get inside your network to then also have some kind of, level of access to relay that or spoof that to get you to authenticate. And I have to know which systems have NTLM v1 enabled. Like if it's a global policy for your entire AD network, sure, that's a little bit more. But like if it's just one server that you got to relay that has NTLM v1, I have to know which server that is. I have to be in a place to be able to relay that. That's not a critical. Like I'm not. I have to
Mhm.
have a shell first. Like I have mitigating controls that stop me from getting that shell that stop me from relaying and stop me from
Mhm.
knowing that service. So yeah, it's bad. You need to fix it. Absolutely. 100%. But like critical, should I get people out of bed for it? No.
Mhm. And I wonder if it's almost, there as a pen tester, I see a lot of concern going the other way where it's a, companies not necessarily taking things seriously when there is a critical. But I think it's that level of, like you said, it's understanding those mitigating controls that are there. I'm so glad that you hit on that term because it's so important to realize that what is actually there. What is the reality that you're dealing with is that vulnerability isn't in a bubble.
Yeah, I actually
On that
released.
note,
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
I
Oh,
released
I was going to
back
mention, go ahead.
in.
Yeah. We're doing it twice. Great timing. This is the fun part with delay over the stream. So I was going to mention if you had had a lot of success or experience with purple teaming, go ahead with your point though. I can get to that afterwards.
So I released a scorecard. So a lot of pen tests want metrics and figure out how they're doing. And I released a scorecard a few years ago at Wild West Hacking Fest, that you give blue teamers and your point of contact, hey, what do you expect your mitigating controls to be? And it's just a calculus, right? It says, I expect this one to do really well. It's somewhat deployed. It's all the way deployed. Like, these are the good things. And then the red teamer then fills that same thing out, right? Did I see this? Was I caught by this? Did I have to get around this? And stuff like that. And I think that if you have that kind of communication, that kind of scoring, or at least even just, hey, these are the things that we expect you to get caught by, I think that that really goes a long way to providing value to each customer, right? Because that way, in a year's time, they can have that same scorecard and be like, hey, we got 15 on this scorecard because our red team saw, or was caught by, XYZ, but didn't get caught by half the other stuff that we thought was deployed. We fixed that because we didn't know it was broken. And now we get, 300 or whatever the scoring would be on it, because now that stuff that we thought was working, we fixed, and now catches them more. Those mitigating controls are way better, even though the red team still got to domain admin or whatever their goal was. We caught them 17 times versus the 2 in the past, right?
That's
So
an
that's all I'm
interesting
saying.
idea, though. It's almost giving yourself a dynamic like worksheet or scoring sheet. Is you could add on there like whenever you have those new controls, and see what actually worked in practice.
Yeah, and
Have you seen
it gives you year after year too, right? It shows that you're even though, like, the pen test team or the red team is going to get to their goal almost all the time. Like, I don't think I've failed a test, right? But like but you can't show the progression of your program, of your security program, very easily if the test always comes back with, we got everything we wanted, right? Until you get to the pen test team that isn't very good, you go hire them, and so that, like, it shows that you can catch them, which doesn't really give very much value. So a scorecard helps you see the progression over time, that these controls that we're paying millions of dollars for are actually doing better now that we've configured them, or now that we're doing other things.
No, that's such a cool point to bring up. And it's, how do you measure this? What are the things that you care about as an organization? You've taken that and made it into something where it is now tangible. It's no longer, all the touchy feely of like, oh yeah, we think we did well. We think that we did better this time. No, we actually did do better this time. This is our scorecard.
Yeah.
It's like keeping score in golf versus not keeping score,
And
just playing for
it's
fun.
Really, and it creates a really good conversation when you do this scorecard, because the blue team will fill it out first, and then the red team fills out their portion, and then you meet in the middle and say, oh, like, why did I get a 1 on EDR when I think we were fully, like, it's supposed to be like a 3 or 5? And then the red team says, well, we got past it because we could do this. That's where you get value. Like, that's the meat and potatoes. Like, you go, oh, we can tweak that, we can make that better, we can change this, we can talk to our MSP or a vendor to do a better job at finding those kinds of things. And like, that's not on the report. How I got past your EDR rarely goes on a red team report.
Well, and you're taking it and you're actually having those conversations about individual controls then is, I'm thinking myself as a pen tester, in a pen test role, I don't necessarily know all the controls I'm going up against. And that would be so helpful for me because no longer it's, I have a big I'm not a fan of gray box pen testing. I think that white box pen testing is the best thing possible because then you have that serious conversation. And it's exactly that. Is that communication happening, or are you just winging it and going into a pen test? And, that's valuable the first time, but really is it? Or are you just spending a lot of money to get, you're spending a lot of money and not writing things down? But
Yeah, so that comes from two sides, right? You'll
mhm,
have the side, and you can fight. You can have the conversation on both sides. You'll have the side that says, "Well, that's cheating. Like you shouldn't know all this information. We want to know how we really go against a real attacker." But like a real attacker isn't constrained by timelines, so like let's just
mhm,
give us the information so that we can shortcut that timeline. And then you have the pen tester side of things, and we do have to be introspective, right? Some of us are very selfish in the fact that we want the challenge. We want to go and figure out all the things. We want that rush when we get that first shell. And so sometimes we don't fight back when the customer says, let's do a black box. And they're like, oh, cool, I get to do another fish, or, oh, or I get to test my new tool or the thing, we as red teamers and pen testers also have to look inside and say, what is best for the customer, not what is best for Rob.
yeah, exactly. Well, and it's, what is fun versus what is the actual work that needs to be done, you know?
Absolutely.
Shoot, I had a thought off of that. Well, and it's beyond that, you can take these you could even have like one team member that is doing that block box and you keep them in the dark where it's not just do you typically see your pen test on where it's multiple people working on it, or it's just one pen tester that's there?
Oh, so my team, my red
Mm-hmm.
team is a team. Like by
Mm-hmm.
definition, we do things together, right? Um, Pen testing, I understand why there's one person or two people on it,
Mm-hmm.
but red teaming, I think red teaming and pen testing are very different skill sets. Um, they
Mm-hmm.
seem very similar, but they're not. Um, Red teaming, you are a specialist. You need to
Mm-hmm.
know, like, when I first worked at the General Electric red team, I was like, my mind blew out because like I saw we had a we had a tester who specialized in databases. They were amazing in databases. Like anytime we found a database, we're like, hey, here's the database. We didn't
Mm-hmm.
try and bust our head against it, like try and figure it out ourselves. We're like, you're the expert. Here's the database. And so we went and we found, and that's what red teaming is you specialize in things. So like when I joined that team, I was the Windows guy. I wasn't like another tester. I was the Windows guy. So when we got on Windows boxes, they pulled me in. And
Mm-hmm.
so whereas pen testing, you have to be a jack of all trades. You have to know all of the things because it's usually just one or two people.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's almost by having that better communication, by knowing what those controls that are there, you let your specialists do their job. You let the person that's really good at evaluating EDR do their job and do it well.
Absolutely.
No, thank you for diving into that. Such an interesting topic just to dig into. Um, we are getting close to an hour and a half. So I'm going to make sure that I move on in the questions rather than that was a great
Sure.
conversation though. um, I guess one quick question. We might have hit on this already. Do you find that there are any misconceptions in industry that really grind your gears? Any misconceptions you really
So
like or don't like? Go ahead.
the um man, we could talk about full disclosure for a while. The password stuff really grinds my gears. Oh, here's one that isn't talked about too much. So I think that the misconception about pen testing is really frustrating, um, because most pen testers and most pen test companies, they'll just do a pen test and be done with it, instead of trying to figure out what is best for the customer, right? So some companies, they just want to do a pen test and be done with it, and then they take the report and they throw it in the round file, and and that's fine.
I
Like,
appreciate that
it's a
Simpsons reference,
checkbox.
by the way. That was wonderful. The round
It's a
file.
checkbox. Cool. That's what it's for. But as a pen tester, I challenge everyone who's doing that to say, "Hey, is a phishing really valuable to the customer? Is breach sim really valuable to the customer?" If you are going into and I've talked about this to a bunch of different people, but if you go into a pen test knowing, like, if you on day one you know you're going to get domain admin in the first 5 minutes, don't do it. I challenge everyone to go and say, what's best for this customer? Sometimes a domain password audit, the basics, and saying, hey, passwords, you have horrible passwords, let's go through that real quick. That's more important. That's where they get more value than knowing that they have eternal blue on one of their domain controllers. Like, because they can just patch that. That's a one and done thing. Whereas having weak passwords is not something that's easily fixed, right? Or having a lack of MFA, or having anything to do with identity or core root problems, right? So if you're on a pen test, and again, you see it going to be an easy day, why don't you take the time to do the hard thinking and say, what do I think this customer really needs to figure out, really needs to get it right? Like, if there's, like I said, if there's eternal blue on the DC, why is there eternal blue on the DC? Not go patch this. Hey, do you have a change control program? Do you have a patching program? Do you have maintenance windows? Like, help them find and figure out, and even spend the time to set up the things that they need. So I was on a pen test for Rapid7 one time, and I got domain admin in the first 30 minutes of being there. Cool, whoop-de-doo. They're like, hey, so Rapid7 at the time, it's gotten way better, so I'm not dishing on Rapid7, but I got a phone call, or I told my boss, like, hey, I finished my test, like, I'm done. I have everything. I own the whole thing. And they're like, cool, you did a week's worth of work. Come on back. And it was Monday. I'm like, can I stay and help fix stuff? And they're like, no. Like, you did what you needed to do. So I actually took PTO and I stayed there, and I sat down with this guy, because the point of contact was the IT guy, he was the security guy, he was the CISO, he was the printer admin. Like,
oh my gosh, poor
shop.
Guy.
Yeah,
he's wearing enough hats.
So
I'm sure he appreciated you being there, though. And it's like you said, it's what's best for the customer in that case.
Yeah, and I sat there and fixed the things that I thought were more important. I helped him configure his firewall. I helped, like, change the VPN configuration. I deleted a bunch of users that, like, no longer worked at the company. And we just spent the whole week, 9 to 5, fixing that organization. And that was what he needed, was an extra person. That's what he needed. And instead of just being a pen test and going home and doing what I thought was fun, I spent the time. And I'm not saying I'm like any altruistic whatever. Like, this was what I saw that I needed to do, as I spent the time to fix and help be the person or the thing that he needed, versus just the assessment that I thought was fun. So that's what I'm saying. Like, as a pen tester, be the thing that your customer needs versus just the thing that you want to do.
I guess 2 questions after that. I mean, to your point, do you feel like it's really that focus on, you're providing a better product? Do you feel like it's that focus on that better product versus doing what you think you need to do as a pen tester and then getting out?
Yeah, I think that it's great that you brought up better product, because one of the other aspects of this was there was a time where I was doing this pen test for a company, and I kept giving them my report, and never really saw changes year after year. And I'm like, at one point, like the second year in, I'm like, hey, is there a better way that I can provide this to you? And instantly, without even thinking, he's like, yeah, like we have to hand jam this thing into Jira for tickets, and we never really have the time. So if you could output your report in like Jira tickets, that would save things. So I wrote a little script to access their API. I stood up a lab Jira just so I could test my code. I wrote the report. I made it inject into Jira and just API based making tickets and assign it to myself. And so that year I wrote run the code against their Jira instance. It imported all the tickets, all the findings, and assigned it to the point of contact, and he reassigned it to everyone else that needed to fix it. Very next year, none of those findings were there, and it was just that simple. And like finding the product, and that's a really great way of saying it. So thanks, Stark, for putting that into a way of saying it. But finding the product that best suits your customer, it should be the goal of a pen test.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, and like you said, it was just that one question. And that's often what it is that one question of how do you think I could do better, or how can I help you how can I provide a better outcome?
Absolutely.
I mean, do you feel like you see that a lot with many pen test teams where they miss that mark?
Yeah, I do. And it's not anything against them. Like, I think that when you become a junior pen tester, you see how your senior pen testers do it, and you don't question that there's a better way, right? And sometimes they don't even give you space to do it a better way. And imposter syndrome comes into that too. Like, you don't think that you have a better way of doing things. And sometimes, like, the customer, like for me, for Rapid7, they're like, no, come home. Like, how many people would take time off to then stay with a customer for that time, right? So, like, I got lucky because I had the time off to do it, but and I don't expect anyone to do that.
It shows who you are
That's
as a
their
person. It shows that you care about the work that you're doing, and that's your brand. If we're getting into the personal brand,
it's
terminology.
So I love that you think so highly of me, but like, it's really just me getting pissed off that I have to see the same findings year after year. I don't want to see the same findings year after year.
It means you care about your job, though. It means that you care about these findings being fixed. Is a lot of pen testers want to show up and they detonate the bombs, they make the big boom, and they watch the explosion, and then they're out. And it's like, cool, you guys came and blew up our environment. How do I fix it? Where's the broom? Yeah. But no, thank you for diving into that. It's such a powerful idea, and it's something that it's so simple that it doesn't take a lot of effort, and it's just that extra, what can I do to do better?
Yeah, and it really is just, hey, I know that my job is to do a pen test, and this is what your definition of a pen test is, and that's what my definition of a pen test is. But let's put aside those definitions. I'm now a security expert for you. How can I help? Right? Not I'm the pen tester. You have me for a whole week. What is best for your company? What is best for your team? And so, like, if my pen test, like, I will write you a pen test report that has findings and stuff, and then I'll spend the entire week like doing purple team stuff. If that's what your incident response team or your point of contact wants, right? If that's what provides the most value, like, I'll write the like 2-page pen test report just to make sure you have the checkbox fixed and done. Like, I got a pen test, and then I will do what you need and what is best for your company.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, and it's like, you paid for the week, you're getting the week, in that case.
Exactly. And you gotta be okay with yourself. You have to be okay with redefining what your work is.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a good thing that you touched on that in particular, because it can make you feel uncomfortable. You're now challenging the foundation of what your job is and thinking, can I do this better? And not everyone's comfortable with thinking about that. It's yeah. I did want to get into. We had an awesome question asked in chat from Bala. That was, "Hey Dart, can you ask Rob about what is the biggest challenge you faced as a director of the Red Team? Do you have any just unique challenges you faced in your role, or anything that you find that just really changed your mind or just didn't meet your expectations when you first got into it?"
Yeah. So, this is going to sound super selfish, but my biggest challenge that I've had is staying away from the keyboard. Like when my team does something fun or exciting or interesting, and I'm like, hey, if you find some extra time on my calendar, I'd love to help with this. And they go, nah, we got it. And it's like, oh, come on. And so it really is just the staying away from the keyboard. I will say that they do include me sometimes, which I feel very loved for them for doing that. But yeah, mostly they do their work and it's really amazing and it's awesome. And I feel like I still do keyboard stuff. I still keep current, like Hack the Box and other like Try Hack Me and all that stuff. But and so I don't feel like I don't feel like I'm atrophying those skills because I still do that on the side because that's what I love to do. But I do miss like working on the team versus working above the team, trying to make sure that their heads are covered and stuff.
No, that's a really interesting point where it's, hey, maybe invite your director, see who wants to come along. Sometimes it's fun to pull people in and, even if you have, like a lab situation where maybe your team has like a pen test lab and you have boxes you can go and bash against, or like a internal training program, it can be really fun. That's a fun idea thinking, hey, what if we invite leadership to come in and, just see if they want to come and hang out for a little bit, nothing.
Yeah. And so I'll tell you that we have a program that I started at the company I work for right now, where every 2 weeks we all get together and everybody's invited, everyone from the entire company. No matter if you work in IT or not, you are invited to come attack a Hack the Box. So we pick a box every week and we all go at it. So the blue team can come join. They can learn how we do stuff. And it's a very open thing. So if we get ahead of someone, we're okay with coming back to it. If we need to explain a different technique or whatever, and it's a very open thing. So we've had like directors and leaders come in and be like, oh, this is fun and interesting. This is a cool thing. We've had people who are like interns and stuff and come in and try stuff out. Like, and some people stay, some people don't. Like people's schedules get up and down, but it's sort of like a TV show because it's 1 week increments. We don't like build on anything. So if you come in at halfway through one of the sessions, it's just a lot of fun and we explain stuff and we teach, and that's really what it's for. And that's the one time that I do get to play is when I get to join them on that.
Sounds cool though. Do you mind if I ask how long? I'm curious. How long do you schedule those sessions for? Is it like a 3 or so hour sort of thing where you're just hanging out in a call?
So we schedule them on Fridays so that it doesn't impact a lot of work. We schedule them afternoon. So and you get to stay as long as you want. So we usually stay until we break the box, until we get root or something. So we have had a few that have gone into the weekend, but there's no obligation to stay or whatever. But it's usually quite a few hours. It depends on like how hard of a box we choose or whatever.
No, that's cool. Speaking from just the pen tester, if I were in that and I saw leadership and other people, like not even just leadership, it's, having blue team there, that's such a good collaboration and just team building exercise. If
Absolutely.
We're going to the business systems out of that, you have that opportunity to go and mess up in front of other people. And, that's one of the most humanizing things you can do. And it just sounds like a ton of fun. I'm jealous of the fact that y'all have that. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's
Do
a
you have
lot
any
of
favorite
fun.
boxes you've
And
done with that?
oh man, favorite
I know,
boxes
putting you
that
on the
we've done
spot
with.
here.
Yeah, I don't have any off the top of my head. Forest was a really fun box for me because I got to show off like Windows skills. But I think that everyone is different, and it's cool to see different people on the team and even people outside of my team come alive on certain parts. So we've had people from like the instant response team. They're like, "Oh, I know that Linux thing. I know how to do that on Linux." And some people, on the and can I lodge a complaint on behalf of all of our teams, everyone who joins us on
Yes.
this thing?
Do I get to be on
Complaint
the
number
receiving
one.
end? Because if so, yes, sure, that sounds like fun.
Complaint number one, and this is the only complaint. 80 and 22. Can we do anything other? Like we don't have to nmap anymore. Like every box, 80 and 22, and that's it. Like if it's a Linux box, 80 and 22 is like just. It would be nice to like have, even if it's a web server and SSH, put the web server on any other port, like any port. Just mix it up a little bit, but 80 and 22 is just like always there.
I'll be sure to relay that on. I appreciate the candid feedback with that. Yeah. I mean, I've seen the same thing, and it's, sometimes it's just a pattern that those boxes end up getting into. But no, that's funny. Well, it sounds like such a good exercise. That I never even thought of that. Having everyone shares their screen in the call where you have incident response tagging in that you have all these skill sets that as a pen tester, you said earlier in the call, it's having that jack of all trades and being able to learn from other people and see people do the thing, but not just seeing them do it. I get to see them think about it as they do it,
Yeah.
and I get the context. It's just that sounds like a ton of fun. I'm actually going to probably take that back to my workplace and let them know, hey, we should do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And
No.
it gets you to have other perspectives too. Like someone from like operational technology or OT systems comes in and they're like, "Oh, I know Modbus. There's Modbus on this thing. I'm now the expert." And they get that feeling that they get to show off in front of the red team, which is awesome, which is really cool. And it boosts
That's such a
confidence.
powerful idea. Just calling that out real quick. That's so cool. Here, go ahead.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt you for long.
No, that's all I'm saying. Like it's really awesome.
I hope that everyone does. If you've never had the chance to, it's almost like in programming, there's paired coding or paired programming. It's almost like a paired pen test. And it's so powerful just to sit and work with people and just, go and mess around on a box. Just go have fun. No,
exactly.
that.
And
thank you so much for sharing that. I'm not kidding. I will be taking that back to my workplace and letting them know, hey, we should do this.
I think the other powerful piece of this is that you're all working on the same box, and it's not a contest. It's not Rob trying to get to the end first. It's hey, I figured this out. Oh, I know how this works. Hey, I know this. And the team collaboration on it is so important and so awesome that I love. Like sometimes I hate Hack the Box because like I'll run into a buffer overflow or a stack overflow and I'll not remember how to do it and I'll stop doing the box because like that's not my thing and I don't have the time to look up every reference that I need to do that. Whereas we're doing it as a team, someone on my team knows how to do that. And so they'll do that, they'll get the code ready, I'll copy their stuff, I'll get that next piece, and then I might know how to do the like step 3 after that. And that's really the powerful piece is really learning where those strengths are and coming together as a team.
Yeah, I mean, you get to learn vicariously through them, and that just sounds, even just hearing it secondhand here, it sounds like it's such a fun experience to have, especially on a Friday. I mean, that sounds like a great team building time, and a lot of time on that Friday, that time isn't going to be used for much anyways. So have fun with it.
Yeah.
No, that's
and sometimes
awesome.
when we pick a easy box, or like the director picks an easy box because he wants everyone to go home early, we get through their box really quickly and then we're done for the weekend, and it's really great. It's also a really fun way to kind of give someone an early day off.
Heck yeah, I can imagine. No, that's so cool. That's a really smart idea. Thank you so much for sharing that on the as part of the
No
AMA.
problem.
Heck yeah.
Sure.
Now, I would be remiss if I did not ask you a little bit about Hack 5. When we had
Sure.
spoken before, you had mentioned a fun story about the Bash Bunny. And I know I'm putting you a little bit on the spot here. Would you mind telling that story for the stream?
Sure. So the Bash Bunny came to be in a very weird and interesting way. I had a USB armory, and as you do at DEF CON, you buy a bunch of hardware that you'll never use. Um, and so
Wait a
I
minute.
bought the
I'm never going
USB
to use any
armory.
of that stuff I bought at DEF CON? Go
So I
ahead.
bought a USB armory and I had it for like a couple of years. And I was like, I don't know what to do with this thing. It plugs in, I get it, it's a server, but it doesn't have internet access, so I can't like have it do a thing for me. It can't be like a Lambda function doing things for me on the side. It can't be a Docker container. Like it's just a server that only runs. So I was thinking about it one day. And I'm like, all right, like maybe I can run Responder on it. Like I got to figure out how to get it on it. So I ran Responder on it, and I like had it hit me or have it hit the USB stick on Ethernet, and it worked. But like, of course it worked because I was forcing my system to like authenticate to it. So I was like, well, that's kind of useless, but it was kind of cool. Like I'll get it to auto start. Let's see what it can do. Let's see if I plug it in, is it going to auto auth? It didn't. And so I put up like a DHCP server and some other things to get it to do that. And I finally got it to kind of work automatically. And so I unplugged it and I plugged it into another computer, and that computer was still locked. And I had like blinking lights on it that it would tell me when it got a hash. So it would blink a certain thing when Responder would get a hash. And I plugged it in while the system was still locked, and it started blinking. I'm like, that shouldn't do that. That is not, that shouldn't, like, I was about to log in and it did it. I'm like, okay. So I log into the system and I log into the USB armory, and it has my hash for my account. I'm like, whoa. Okay. So this has to be a one-off. And I've been burned in the past when I don't test things fully, like, and they only work on my system. So I'm like, okay, so what other systems can I plug this into that I haven't plugged it into before to test this? So I may have taken it to my wife's computer just to see if it worked. So I plugged it in. 5 seconds later, it's fully locked out, but like I get a hash. I'm like, okay.
Does she know you
I
tested
think
this on her computer?
I absolutely did. It gets worse. So I'm like, okay, I've probably plugged in the USB armory to her computer in the past. I want to make sure this works. So I might have told a friend to go to Walmart and plug it into a bunch of machines at Walmart to see if it still got hashes. And
You would
it
never do
did.
that. No, never.
So I came home, or my friend came home and gave it back to me. And I'm like, okay, this is really cool. So I wrote up a really short blog post about how I can steal hashes from a locked computer. And I wrote it up in a blog post, and it was like 2:00 in the morning when I finally published it, and I went to bed. My phone was plugged in to the wall when I went to bed. It was dead in the morning. My phone had so many alerts go through it, and I didn't have like do not disturb or whatever on. My phone was so like overutilized by the morning because my blog post had been pulled up by Reuters and a bunch of other like news agencies, like hacker finds vulnerability in Windows where stealing credentials out of locked machines. I was like, it's true, but I didn't think it was that big of a deal. And like it just blew up, and my phone was dead. And I had like like missed phone calls and like voicemails and all this stuff going on. And Darren messages me on the side. So Darren Kitchen from Mac 5, he messages me and I'm like, hey, how you doing? And I just saw your post about the land turtle, because I used the land turtle and the USB Armory as kind of the same thing because they both show up as Ethernet adapters. And he's like, I saw your stuff on Reuters. I'm like, what? And so like I go over to Reuters and he's like, yeah, hey, this blog post you did it on the land turtle is like, how do I get this, automated on the land turtle? And we talked about it, and he's like, well, what if we had another device that did this and did it faster? And because he was already working on like a USB based device that had a better processor and a few other things. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. What if it did more than that? What if it did like if it had an Ethernet device, but you could switch modes so that it had the like the rubber ducky feature where it had mass storage and a few other things. And he's like, yeah, that's cool. And then we went like back and forth on ideas, and like and like the Bash Bunny just came to be because we were both really excited about like what it could do. And I actually, like 2 days prior, had read an article from, oh man, he goes by Traindo, Traindo on Twitter. He did a Google blog post because he was part of Google Zero Code or Project Zero, and he did a blog post about how Windows can be booted into kernel debugging mode. And I'm like, hey, if it has a serial portion of it too, we could do this other exploit. So basically, and I guess I'm talking about this publicly for the first time, if you plug in a Bash Bunny and you boot a Windows machine into kernel debugging mode, which is just one of the F8 options, the Bash Bunny can operate as COM0, and that COM0 goes into the Bash Bunny, which means you can debug the kernel. So with a little bit of Python coding and a little bit of love, you can have an automated kernel debugger on the Bash Bunny that then changes sticky keys on that system in memory only to be command.exe. And so you boot into kernel debugging mode, you put in the Bash Bunny, it becomes COM0, it connects to the kernel, it says, I'm going to modify these attributes for the registry, and then you hit shift 5 times and you have a system level shell on that system. So the Bash Bunny, now it doesn't break like hardware encryption, so you're not going to get past that. But if you can get to the F8 menu, you have a shell on that box with just a Bash Bunny.
That's incredible. Now, you said that as you're getting this already, a little bit of love is needed to make this work. Is that a hard set thing? I'm not sure if that was love that was involved there to get that exploit to go.
So I will tell you that Windows kernel debugging on Linux is not a very supported thing. Like, you can't find libraries for it. So like I had to do a lot of coding and like debugging of the kernel protocol, going back and forth, like the protocol it does for when you do remote debugging, and find what I needed to do to actually get a prompt out of it and set the commands and set the breakpoints and so on. So that was a lot of love, because it took me a few days to kind of figure that out and a couple of weeks to kind of implement it. But yeah, if there's any people out there that know Python way better than me and want to try and make this more capable, I'm down for it.
That's so cool. That must have been such a surreal experience waking up. And I've never heard of a situation like that where your phone is dead and it's still plugged into the wall, but it's dead from the notifications. That's crazy. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for sharing that. I had remembered it when we were talking, and it's such a cool story. And it's, it really, behind something like the Bash Bunny, it's so fitting to have such a cool story behind that it's really how that came to life.
And and it wasn't any expertise on my part. I accidentally plugged it into a locked machine and had it show, and I understood that the flashing lights that I had set up were a hash. Like I noticed that, and I was like, hey, this shouldn't work the way that it is working. And so that's all it was. Like there's no special expertise there. Like,
I mean,
yeah,
but it
anyway.
speaks to that, be willing to try new stuff because you never know what's going to happen. It might work.
Yeah, definitely.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. It looks like we're getting close to the end of our AMA time here. I did want to ask you just one final question.
Sure.
And this is one that I always love to ask our guests for AMAs. Do you have any advice for just younger hackers or just advice in general that you'd like to give those watching the stream?
Yeah. Never be afraid to ask a stupid question, because that's one of the things that I think has been broken in my brain since I was born. Like I don't have the fear of asking someone a stupid question. I never have. And so like when I was having troubles with Meterper and Metasploit and stuff like that, I asked HD Moore, and he responded, and he's like, "Oh, that's a cool question. Here's the answer." Or he said, "Here's the blog post," or whatever. And like I have never had a fear of going up to anyone and saying, "I don't know how this works. Can you help me?" And I would say that junior pen testers, I don't get enough of that. I'm not saying that I'm the expert in anything. I'm saying like I feel that a lot of testers, a lot of junior infosec have a fear of looking stupid. And I think that you should discard that feeling. Like it's okay to have the stupid question, because sometimes the stupid question, like what should I do with this USB armory thing, leads into being on the front page of Reuters. But like
That's
seriously,
such a great comparison right there. Well, it's like what you were saying. It's a stupid question doesn't always. It's not necessarily a stupid question. It may be a silly question to you, but it doesn't mean that it is one.
yeah. And you should not feel, and I know this is hard to do, but you shouldn't feel like that question is going to reflect badly on you. Because when I get questions, any question, if someone asks me a question that says, "Hey, how do I run Nmap?" I don't think they're stupid. I think they're interested in it. So I actually think more of them, right? If they're open and willing to ask a question, like it actually makes me more interested in helping them, right? So yeah, if you're a junior pen tester or someone new to infosec, ask all the questions, ask all of them.
Heck yeah, that's such a great point, and it is such a wonderful thing to end on. There is just asking those questions. To your point, it's it shows your passion. It shows that you care about the industry, and I'm sure that you see that. I'm sure it comes out in interviews and when you talk to other people that you can see the passion in the way they talk about things.
Yeah, definitely.
Heck yeah. Perfect. Well, before we wrap things up, I did want to give you the opportunity. Would you be able to list off some of your socials, some of the cool ways that people can connect with you, or anything cool you've got going on that you want to advertise for everyone in chat?
Yeah, like always, Hack Five stuff is really awesome. The one thing I will say, I guess, is if you ever try and reach me via email, it is a failure in observability, I guess, because like I get so many emails, like I just can't read them all. And so the best way to talk to me is via Discord. I'm on the Hack the Box Discord, or via direct message on Twitter, on @Mubix on Twitter. Those are always open, and I don't get a flood of that. So like if you ever want to have a question or whatever, I'm all open to that. Any instant messaging, essentially, I I will respond to you on instant messaging, but like email is not the road to contact me. It's not. It's just yeah.
Heck yeah. Before we wrap things up, did you have any shout outs you wanted to give out? I see a bunch of people mentioning Nova Hackers in the chat as well.
Yeah, so Nova Hackers, I started Nova Hackers with Chris Gates, Colonel Onage in 2009. COVID happened and it kind of died off a little bit. We tried virtual. There's a small contingent of Nova Hackers that do still go in person. I think that Nova Hackers is going to be revived and become itself again, but it's kind of in this limbo period where a couple of really core members are doing a really good job at keeping it alive, but I have not been back in a while. But Nova Hackers is a great place to share and teach and learn. I truly love Nova Hackers for how the presentations happen. So it's when you present at Nova Hackers, and you're required to present at Nova Hackers if it's your first or second time, but it is an open forum. It is not like I'm going to give my presentation and then I'll have questions at the end. No, halfway through your sentence on your first slide, you're going to get a question. And I love that because it's more open dialogue. And like if I'm doing a presentation and something on my first slide is stupid, I don't want to wait to the end where someone might forget that first slide was stupid for someone to give me that feedback. Like I'll make the edit right there and then to make it more sense. And that's what I love about Nova Hackers is like I became a better presenter. I became more aware of my biases. I became more open to different viewpoints because I presented at something like that. So Nova Hackers, I love it to death. I hope that it comes back to its full form eventually.
Heck yeah. I mean, City Sex in general are just so amazing for that. And I mean, that's how I improved my presenting skills as well, was go mess up in front of other people that will, gently tell me what I did wrong, but it'll be funny all the same.
Absolutely.
Did you have any other shout outs you wanted to give? Nova Hackers is a big one, I know.
No, I'm probably forgetting a bunch of stuff. So I appreciate everyone who's just shout outs to everyone who's helped me in my career. HT Moore being a big one. Colonel Onage, Chris Gates being another big one. John Strand and a bunch of the other weirdly well-known people. Like I wouldn't be where I was where I am today without them being open to questions and me being the silly person who's new to the industry, just asking a ton of questions. So of legendary people, like I walked up to Dan Kaminsky and asked him how DNS worked. Like that's like the level of like, I don't care who you are, I'm still gonna ask the expert on the thing the question that I want to know. That's the shout out I'd make, is all the people who got me to where I am today.
Heck yeah. That is a hell of a shout out to end things off on. Awesome. Thank you so much, Mubix. Thank you so much, Rob, for being here. It has been a real pleasure being able, especially being the one that's hosting, and being able to have just a fun conversation with you. Thank you, everyone that's tuned in for chat and everything. No, thank you so much for being here. Heck yeah.
Yeah. And if there's any question that you still had, anyone who's listening, please feel free to direct message me on Twitter that question, and I'll definitely get back to it.
Heck yeah.
Have a great day.
No, thank you so much for being accessible and all that. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much to everyone in chat. But that is going to do it for another amazing AMA. Awesome. Thanks, everyone.